painting to photography, from beadwork to woodworking, KQAL-FM on the campus of Winona State University presents Art Beat. Art Beat highlights the work and accomplishments of local artists from in and around Winona. Support for Art Beat is made possible by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund.
To be or not to be? That is the question. Well, it's a question anyway. Actually, it's the only quote I know from Shakespeare. So really, I have many questions. And that's why I talked to Harri Horsley, costume designer for the African Company Presents Richard III, which was part of the Great River Shakespeare Festival 2022. Harri talks to us about what the job of costume designer entails, why accessories are key, and how they got into costume design in the first place. We even get into how the clothes that people wear signify different things about them. So, to be or not to be? Well, I say just come and be with us for the next 20 or so minutes, and we can learn about costume design together. I'm Bill Stoneberg with Harri Horsley, costume designer with the Great River Shakespeare Festival, today on Art Beat. Hi, how you doing?
Good, about you?
Good. I'm here with Harri Horsley. They are the costume designer for African Company Presents Richard III.
Richard III, yes.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, for sure. Like I said before I turned the mic on, I've been looking forward to doing something on costuming for a while now. I think it's really interesting how all this stuff comes together with the different departments. Like, it really is an amazing thing you guys do.
It's quite amazing, especially what our crafts artisan does every single day.
Yeah. Well, it's all the fun stuff, right?
Yes, I mean, it is. It's a bunch of fun stuff. Like, we have sewing machines and random, and they move all this in. It took Rain 2 days to set up this room, I believe, and she built these tables too. So,
oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. I love the smells. It smells like fun work in here, like paints and things like that, you know.
No, sometimes, like, you don't pick up the smells because you're used to them. So it's very interesting when other people pick up on the smells. They're like, okay, so what the hell goes on in here?
Well, I have a love of photography. I'm a little older, so I remember the darkroom and those, you know, the smells of good work.
Yeah, you get used to it. It is, and I like that saying, the smells of good work, because there's a lot of good work that's done in here.
Well, what got you into like costume design for theater and stuff like that to begin with?
Originally, I went to school for fashion design, and then I was trying to figure out if I was going to go to school for journalism. But costume design basically merges the two, because you're reading a script and you're really diving into the character. So you're like an applied historian, an applied anthropologist, an applied sociologist. When you're trying to figure out character analysis, was also like the basis and the foundation of the story and the character. So you're building, like, you work a lot with the performer, the actor, whichever title you want, and you really dive into their characters, why they wear specific things, why they interact with different characters. A lot of things as human beings we don't pick up on, but that's one of the biggest things that I like about my job. Which is why I kind of fell in love with it. At first I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, and then I was like, oh, this is kind of it's something that you kind of fall into. It's like few people know, but like nowadays, it's just kind of something that you fall into. Right, I feel like, yeah.
Once you do it, then you realize, right?
Once you do it, it's kind of you realize it, because nothing is ever the same. Usually, it's always a different job, a different place. Mm-hmm. So, like, I was randomly around. I was doing a movie. I was working on a movie last year, which is actually, it was with Netflix. It's called, I think, Look Both Ways or Look Two Ways. I forgot what it's called, but it was called something else originally, and it's with Lily Reinhart. It comes out in August. And I had a random dog running around, you know, peeing and pooping everywhere while trying to get costumes and shopping for costumes for this Netflix film. But it was my dog. I had her when she was a puppy, so she came on set. And it was filmed at the same place where they're doing Spy Kids now. So,
cool.
Yeah.
Fun.
Yeah.
You know, I heard you mention like about the script and the characters, things like that. What is the first thing? Like, how do you start when you're designing for a production? What's your first step? What's the first things you do?
My first step is usually a conversation with the director on exactly what they're thinking about a piece. And sometimes directors come up, they're like, do you want to do this? I'm like, give me the script. Typically, it's a yes for us, typically, but we read the script and we really dive into the story at first, and then we read it like 3 or 4 times in order for us to understand how the breakdown of each scene happens, why people are wearing specific things. There's like different levels to it, you know, when you're trying to understand or enjoy it at first, and then you're trying to understand the characters, and then you're diving into each specific character, and then you're diving into what specific pieces that they wear, and you're doing research, all of that at the same time. Because this show is in 1821. So around that time, we're thinking about our country and it being young, and I was talking to the director, and I was like, well, the War of 1812 was about, a good 9 years before this. So we're still at war with Britain. Well, at least they feel the cousins that feel animosity towards us. But this is like, a good 50, not 50, but a good 40 years before the Civil War. And a lot of times we forget that we were still a fairly young country at that time. So there's different parts of this script in particular that hints at that. And when you'll see it in the backdrop, when you kind of look at the burlap, and it resembles an American flag in some cases. Yeah. The way it's pieced together.
Right. Do how what would you say, like a specific character, like what's the kind of how you see the most important part of it? Like what affects the costume of a specific character the most? Is it like the character or the scene or?
A lot of the things that I've realized, especially later on, was their accessories. Okay. Doug, our artistic director, uses pocket watches, and some of it's gold. He uses the cane. The neckties, depending on the fabric of the neckties, when you look at exactly how pocket watches work, the gold compared to silver, and Billy and him have similar ways of interacting in class, but there's also a difference when it comes to etiquette in not wealth, but also class, because wealth and class are two different things. If you see the Gilded Age, it's a prime example of that. You have old money, you have new money, which Billy is new money and Doug is old money. So a lot of the cases, you look at their accessories rather than the whole pieces, because that is what builds everything up. And a lot of people, like, if the accessories don't work, if something is not working, it kind of gives away the whole character rather than just putting a piece together, because you have to focus on the whole picture and not a specific part of the picture. So I think that's one of the most biggest things is accessories. The haberdashery, which is hats, millineries for women, haberdasheries for men, and accessory pieces. Millinery actually isn't just millinery, it's the accessories of millinery. So like you're looking at that with bonnets with Anne or specific things, but a lot of it is a lot of studying time. Yeah, especially during this period.
Well, and that's interesting that you mentioned the accessories, because it makes sense now that you say that. Like, it might not be something like I would notice specifically, but I would feel that something's off, I think, right?
That's the specific part. I think one of my mentors told me this earlier. If you feel that nothing is wrong and you're kind of immersed in the world, you have done your job. Nice. If you feel like something is off and all the audience members feel like something is off, that's when it's not cohesive, right? My job is to fade into the background. Essentially, I know, which is typically, I know it's like, but that is my job is fade into the background, make sure it all looks okay, and that's what we work with. A good designer works with a team of other designers who work together, and then they make the piece look cohesive. You can't just be like, this is my costumes and this and this and this. If you're not working well with the lighting designer, if you're not working well with the scenic designer, which some people, I'm gonna be honest, some people are like that. And it's just, you're not a people's person if you don't do that, right? And it's not about you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. I spent a lot of time in my younger days playing bass guitar in bands, and I think that got into my head like, oh, that's the point, is if no one notices me at all, I'm doing my job.
Right. Exactly. Right? Well, that's something that was way different when I started fashion design, because you're usually working in a room by yourself, right? So if you're looking at opinions, if you're looking at pieces, and specifically we talk with our costume shop designer, not designer, but our supervisor or costume shop director, Stephanie, or our draper, Heather, particularly we have meetings on exactly how would this performer or how would this character button their buttons, or how would they finish this hem, because back then there it's a different class, right? So you're trying to figure out exactly how things go together. For example, you see the cape at the end, and we were having conversations about, because it's like this linen cape, but we were thinking that the characters would make it out of burlap. since the back is in burlap. So like they would dye it and they'll make the characters. And we actually had a burlap cape and we ended up changing it for this linen one because it was a lot more sturdier. So like that's kind of the parts of the storytelling that come in, and you have these conversations with your team to see which is the best course of action. If you don't, that's where problems arise, right? So it's a process. It's different layers to it. Yeah.
Well, so speaking of that, like process, like does it, like when you guys do the preview shows and stuff, does the costuming, do you ever change things then during that?
Yes, because it's essentially like it's a preview, but it's somewhat of a tech because you're trying to figure out exactly how it looks like on stage. Most likely when it's a preview, some things it all may be finished and it's fine, but some things may not. So this preview happens before you have a couple of days off, and then you have opening night. Typically, when opening night happens, that's when the show freezes, so nothing can be changed. Right. But previews, things can still be changed, which is like we right after this preview, we will have like a whole tech meeting right after that preview because it's just another tech night. It's just a tech night with the audience for the first time.
Right.
So you're seeing exactly how things are working or things are happening, and then you're like changing it if something's happening at the last minute. So, yeah.
Does, thinking along those lines, does like, how much does costuming affect like an actor's performance? Do they alter their performance once they start wearing stuff?
If you're like a costume actor, a lot of people do. I know in particular actresses or actors like Glenn Close are, or Johnny Depp are, how they interact with their character depends on the costumes. Some people can't really get into their character until they have the costume piece. Which in particular, a lot of actors or actresses typically write in their contracts, I want the costumes for this and this and this, which is what Reese Witherspoon did on Legally Blonde. Like, she has 77 pairs of Jimmy Choos from that movie that she kept on the second, because she learned from the first movie, she kept it on the second. And now a lot of people put those into museums, or they put them into their own personal stock, which is what Debbie Reynolds did with her costume collection. Okay. So costumes are a big thing because they're a part of the movie history or the theater history. So in a lot of cases, like places like Indiana University, I went to UT, the University of Texas, and Robert De Niro donates all his costumes to the Harry Ransom Center there. So they have all his costumes there. Some of them are destroyed, depending on it. So when he got that blown up casino scene where he gets blown up in the car, there's different levels of the costume that are there. And usually some studios or some schools are like, who wants all this? And then he has an agreement with Texas to take all his things. So like costumes are very important to performers because he was trying to shop around for a different place, and the Harry Ransom Center ended up taking that. Glenn Close has this agreement with Indiana University where she donates all of her costumes to them. So you see, 101 Dalmatians, and like there's a difference between the first movie and the second movie. Same with Robert De Niro. As soon as The Irishman was over, he sent all his stuff over there. So like it's very important for some performers. They can't get into their characters to the costumes because it's different, which is why they also have rehearsal wear, where they can practice wearing a pigeon tail coat, because we don't run around wearing pigeon tail coats. Like, it's just not a thing.
Sometimes I think it'd be kind of cool if we did, though.
It would. I mean, some things are coming back. If you see like a double-breasted peacock, I remember when everyone was wearing them, like when I was in high school, which was like 7 years ago. But like people wear things that have been worn before in this decade. Even if you see this Anne's dress, you can wear the same dress in the 1960s in some cases, where you have the high-waisted umpire waist dress. Like, things are recycled. People just don't notice that. Like,
speaking of like recycling, do you like make the costumes all from scratch for each production, or do you build upon things and augment things? How does that go?
It's all of it. Typically sometimes we make things from, because like that cape came in from what we were doing with the curtain, right? And it's different when you are like performing with something, because there's a whole fight scene into this performance, so it can deteriorate. So sometimes we take from specific things. Like I know, for example, we have the curtains that are in the back of, we have these curtains, these merino wool curtains that are in the script. They're used, but we also make these curtains out of the robe that's at the end. So like specific things, and I work a lot with scene designers sometimes, because sometimes we want the costumes to match the set, or to look the same, or to look in the same color palette. Some things are recycled from stock if we do have it. This show in particular was in the the early 19th century, so it was a little bit like, okay, we have to build a lot of things, and then plus everything was rented for Bridgerton parties for some reason. Otherwise, no one's like sitting around doing Jane Austen all the time. So like that's why it was like we had to build a lot of things, because it's a very specific play. But yeah, some things are taken from stock, in particular for Papa's character. Some things are remnants off of fabrics that we have used, and some things are taken from stock. It just depends on what it is.
Cool. So it all depends.
It definitely depends. Firstly, we would like to look through stock to see exactly what's there, but I'm not doing Hello Dolly, so I don't have to, in particular, build everything. But in this show in particular, a lot of things were built for this.
Cool.
Yeah.
Wow. It sounds like a lot of work. Yeah. One thing I was also curious about, like when a photographer walks in a room, they'll notice where the light's coming from, stuff like that. Does that happen to you in everyday life where you're walking and you notice like different people wearing different things?
Of course, I have slight photographic memory. It's a little bit creepy. Cool. So I can notice in particular, when someone was wearing something on a particular day. My parents thought it was weird as a child. So a lot of things with clothing, exactly why people wear certain things, I do pick up on certain things, exactly. Like if, a guy always wears a hat, he probably figures he probably is in the build. Because certain things at certain times weren't a thing. Men wearing hats in buildings, but now it is. But also, you figured if someone is wearing, sweatpants, they're probably not going to go to the gym. They just feel like they're comfy. Right. So, a lot of things we don't talk about in public, but a lot of things you kind of pick up on depending on how a character or how a person moves through the world. So you have to be a people's person, I feel like, to be a costume designer because you're always observing people. Right. It's not just people in the theater. You're observing nurses. You're observing, people who work at a random McDonald's or someone who works at a hardware store. What exactly would they wear? Would they wear it for functionality? Would they wear it for fashion purposes or aesthetic purposes? What would a professor wear? There's different types of professors. There are professors that still wear bow ties to class and full three-piece suits, and there's professors that will wear slack and tunics. You're trying to figure that out, but a lot of the cases, when you are a costume designer or when you work a lot with people, you pick up on certain things depending on how they move and how they walk. It's a little creepy.
Yeah, it sounds like you can tell a lot about people by what they're presenting outside, right?
What they're presenting and exactly how are they carrying themselves, the diction of them, how it's not just their clothes, it's their mannerisms, because a lot of that is depending off of how they move through the world. When you wear a certain garment or if you wear certain things that you like, if you wear patches, or on your jacket or whatever, this is how you're presenting to the world. You think it's cool, no one would notice it, and you're not having a thought about it, but everything has intention.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I think that stuff's fascinating. That is really cool. Well, that's one way to look at it. I just think it's neat. As far as just costume designing in general and Great River Shakespeare Festival, what's the most rewarding part of your job as a costume designer?
I think it's seeing it's not seeing the ending product, it's seeing the process of getting to the ending product, if that makes sense. Yeah. You're seeing how because this was we had multiple meetings, and I was having meetings the day of my graduation, on a Zoom call, getting ready to go to this big Texas stadium, on my phone, and you're constantly, and then I have to fly back here, to continue. A lot of it is seeing the final towards the ending product because, I was here when there was snow and people were ice fishing, on the lake, which was the first time I've seen people ice fishing. But a lot of that, is 7 months in the making. So you're seeing this come from a rendering, and then you're actually seeing being built, and people going into their characters. And a lot of the times people can, like I said, people can operate without their costumes because they're becoming this person, they're embodying this person. So I think that's the most rewarding part of this, especially at the festival, but it's the most rewarding part of my career, is seeing that. Yeah, and you're thinking, okay, this is what the late nights were for. This is what it is.
The big payoff, right?
Yeah, so the audience can enjoy it, or they can take from it, or they can learn something, they can feel something. That's the biggest thing that I like about my career. I'm I know some people who think that I work at Party City, but it's a little different than that. It's a little different, but a lot of it is like, it's a lot of paperwork and a lot of ordering and a lot of shopping.
Right.
And building and sewing and like, as we have caught me painting and just adding in random like rips everywhere.
Right.
Which is, my mom probably doesn't get what I do, but I think she's understanding it, but like it's to a certain degree, I feel like.
Cool. And before we go, how about what's the most challenging part of this kind of work?
I think the most challenging part, that's a tricky one. I think the most challenging part is trying to figure out what we can and what we cannot do. Right? And I think a lot of the times we're trying to figure out exactly what we can do, but a lot of times it's what we cannot do. And a lot of the times you get to like a certain schedule period where you're like, okay, we can't do this, and that's okay. That's something that I'm glad that a lot of like my field is going into, and they're visualizing and they're actually implementing that instead of working their shops to death when it comes to we can do this and instead of finding alternatives, right, where everyone is taking a break and everyone's being safe on specific things, and having mental health breaks is also important for me. It's hugely important for me. But I feel like that's one of the most challenging parts so often, especially in American society, because in other countries in particular, especially in my grandfather's home country, they take a little break. But in America, we typically go and we go. So I think that's one of the things, if anything, the past 2 or 3 years has taught us, is it's okay to take a break. Yeah. Breathe is the most important part. I know it's such a simple word, but breathing, pause and breathing.
Totally.
Yeah.
Before I go, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but before I go, what would you tell someone who thinks, well, maybe costume designing is for me? I would like to get into that. What would you guide them towards, like, as far as resources or for them to learn what it entails?
Your local library. Like, a lot of the things, I think so many people think, going to costume, you have to go to college, you have to do this particular thing, which is also important, but a lot of it is using your public resources, going to museums, going to libraries, like a lot of that. I'm doing a show Sunday at the Park right now with George, or I'm going into doing that show, and they have like this huge Seurat painting and like, the Art Institute of Chicago. Like, I'm going to be visualizing that painting, trying to figure out exactly what characters are. But even from this show, I'm looking at old photos from the 1820s and particularly like the 1810s, because some characters are wearing older things. I know we're wearing things from 10 years ago, and we're looking like that was 10 years ago, but yes, it was 10 years ago, which was 2012. So what were you wearing in 2012? What was on the radio charts? What were you like trying to idolize and wear? But like in particular, like that's kind of what I would do. And that's one of my biggest lessons is, looking at public resources, looking at YouTube, which is another thing. Like, a lot of the time, like, you don't have to pay thousands of dollars to figure this out. Like, a lot of it's just going to your library and looking at books and really studying and examining not just characters, examining figures in history, which are important. Like, going into that, I'm looking at 1820s. I'm also, like I said before, looking at 1812. And exactly what is our nation at that time? What does New York look like? New York does not look like, we're right before the Gilded Age, not right before it, but we're like a couple of decades. So New York is probably like a couple of shacks. Like, it's not, it's not what we think now. And now we have skyscrapers, towering, New York. So it's an island, with a couple of houses on it, but it's not what it looks like now. And none of that stuff really exists anymore. So what we're trying to build a world that we're like, what does it exist like? That's how you have your resources. That's why you got Google, for the most part. But I do like a good old book, because sometimes Google gets the years wrong, but at least in a novel or a book, you can like visualize and see exactly what's going on. Yeah, especially in the United States.
I love it. Thank you so much. I think that's pretty much all I have for you. I really appreciate you talking to us, and thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you, guys. I hope you liked the interview, hopefully. I didn't talk too much.
Loved it. Thanks again to Harri Horsley, costume designer with the Great River Shakespeare Festival 2022, for joining us today on Artbeat. For more information on the festival, go to GRSF.org. For more conversations on art, tune into Artbeat Tuesdays at 12:30 right here on 89.5 KQAL. You can also listen to Artbeat on your favorite streaming services. Find links at kqal.org. I'm Bill Stoneberg, and we've been talking about costume design at the Great River Shakespeare Festival with costume designer Harri Horsley on Artbeat.
Artbeat is written and produced by KQAL-FM on the campus of Winona State University. Visit us on the web at kqal.org.